Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. And today, we've got a fantastic guest on the show, Mr. David Robinson. David, how are you today?
Doing great, Derek. Thanks for the invite and excited to have a conversation with you today.
Awesome. I will say that this is not our first podcast together, so I'm really, really excited to have you on ours for a change. And so thank you for taking the time to come on.
My pleasure.
Why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself? You have a very long bio, and so I could read it, or I could just let you paraphrase for yourself as well. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, real simple. I've been in the real estate business for 17 plus years. The majority of that time was spent on the residential side as a real estate broker agent and mainly focus on traditional residential resale, building small sales teams, and at one point managing a national franchise brokerage. All in all, roughly $250 million in real estate sales. And and then about 5 years ago, and we'll get into a little bit of this, I'm sure, but about 5 years ago, made a transition, a pivot to the other side of the aisle, and started to focus more on the investment side of the business, focusing on investment property. And then more recently, in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, have focused heavily on helping my investor network get involved in larger commercial multifamily syndication and buying some properties on my own. So that's my background. Real estate is pretty much all I have ever known professionally, aside from being fired from my dad's engineering company.
Oh my gosh, that must have been a very humbling experience. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. I want to always talk with our guests about how they got interested in real estate from the beginning. I think I have an idea where this is coming from because you just gave us a hint there in the last with the last breath that you told us. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how that spark for real estate investing or for real estate in general, since you've had such a long career, came about?
Yeah, I have to go all the way back to when I was roughly 20 years old. I was serving a church service mission, and one of the leaders in the mission was a very successful real estate broker in his own right. And he encouraged me when I got home to, explore the real estate world. And so I did so. I was going to school and working for my dad's mechanical engineering firm, and ended up getting my real estate license at the same time in Phoenix, Arizona. About that same time, I joke that I got fired from my dad's engineering firm, which is fairly true. I screwed a bunch of things up, and he got really upset at me, and we both had a mutual agreement that I was fired that day, and it worked out for the best for both of us. But I got my real estate license in Phoenix and transitioned up to the Salt Lake City area, Utah market, and got my real estate license shortly after that up here, and immediately just hit the ground running and trying to make my way in the real estate business. So that's how it all got started for me, and it started from a leader that I really respected and looked up to, and was very successful in his own right as a real estate broker.
Awesome. And so it sounds like you kind of fell into this, right? Because of people suggested it to you, but it also kind of took a little bit of, I mean, we fall into these roles, or we fall into these jobs not knowing exactly who we are at the moment, especially so early on in our careers, right? What did you like so much about real estate that kept you at it for so many years?
Well, I would say, yeah, to your point, I fell into this. I didn't know anyone else in real estate outside of that, leader that I mentioned. Um, and so looking back on it, I didn't have any examples of someone that had been successful, and I didn't really have much communication with that leader from my mission after I had left the mission. So um, to stick with it, really just I moved up here. I got started with a broker up here that encouraged me to specialize in a particular area of real estate. And he mentioned this thing called a short sale, and this is back in 2004. And so I thought, okay, well, that's great. I had this desire to work with investors for some reason.
Hmm.
And I don't know where it came from, other than I just felt like it would be a good fit for me. And so I started to explore this concept of a short sale. This is back in 2004, long before the market took a nosedive and short sales became very, very common. And so I was really on the ground level of figuring out what a short sale is. Anyways, my point is, I just went headlong into this thing and wanted to specialize in it and become an expert in this space. And that's what I set out to do. And ultimately, built a small little business that was one of the largest and most active short sell broker in my area here. And so we would do, hundreds of short sales over that time. And I think that's what kept me going was the timing. Number one, I had become a specialist in a niche market. Two was the timing because I had this ramp up period of roughly 2004 to 2008. So I had 4 years to develop this experience and really brand myself in this niche market and become an expert in the space where I could really add a lot of value to people. And then all of a sudden the market tanked. And all of a sudden I
Yeah.
was flooded with business, right? So much that I couldn't really keep up. And it forced me to really build a team and figure out how to build a business. And it just morphed from there. So I don't know. That was a long-winded answer to a pretty quick question, but I think the reason why I stuck with it and what I enjoyed about it is that it was a challenge all the way, and I was progressing all along the way. And so now there came a point when I got really bored of real estate, and that's part of the transition onto the investing side of the business. But for those first few years, roughly the first 7 8 years, it was really just a challenge, exciting. I was sort of trudging my own path, and I'm pretty entrepreneurial, and I'm a horrible employee. If you get fired by your dad, then you pretty much figure that out at an early age. So I don't know if that is a good enough answer for you,
That's
but
great. No, no, thanks, David. I appreciate that. I want to take a minute to kind of back up, right? And talk about what your family life was like, especially throughout these phases, because you mentioned to me earlier on, and also from the pre-production materials, that you have 4 kids at home, and you like to spend time out and about in the village, right? And what I want to talk to you about is how that balance looked like, or if there was one. And what were the conversations happening at home when you first started this whole thing off and you kind of branched off into real estate for yourself? What was your wife thinking? And fill us in a little bit on how that started.
yeah. So I've been married just about as long as I've been in the real estate business, so roughly 16, 17 years. And I should know exactly, and my wife would probably know if I called her in here and asked her to tell us. But 16, 17 years we've been married, 4 kids, and so got married really within the first year of getting started in the business. And Sarah didn't, she's been a fantastic support all along the way. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why I've been able to stick with it. Because as you know, if you're in a full commission type role and business, there's ups and downs. And especially, what I loved early on about the short sale business, number one is I didn't need a lot of income. I mean, we were young, right?
Mm-hmm.
Newly married, didn't have a lot of expenses. And it gave me a window, some runway to really figure out my craft. And so, we didn't make a lot of money in those first few years. And
Mm-hmm.
it took a while for that to ramp up. And then as the short sale thing hit, we were really able to automate that.
Mm-hmm.
And what was cool about that is that the chaos of the roller coaster, the commission roller coaster that we were experienced previously, sort of leveled out because I built more of a business around it, a systematized business around the real estate services that we were providing. But when the market started to shift back in 2011, roughly in Utah, we realized the short sale business was starting to go away. And we were all in on short sales. And so it was a big transition for us to go from 100% short sales with a very predictable business to back to this commission roller coaster again. And having a wife that has been supportive of me and trusting um, and being the person to just, encourage and push you along is critical in those moments where you have ups and downs in this business.
I couldn't agree with you more there, but do you have any advice, or maybe can you talk a little about and give us some insight into what your wife's thinking? Because, a lot of people who are starting out and they're in full commission and you built this entire system based on something, that you've known for four years plus, right? And then all of a sudden it starts to implode because of external forces, right? Nothing of your doing. Um, Tell us a little bit about the trust that happened and some of the conversations that must have been very hard. You have this full onboarded staff, and now you have to do an about face and be like, all right, guys, just kidding. We're doing something else now. Like,
Right.
I mean, I know it didn't happen overnight, but talk us through
Yeah.
a little bit about what was happening at home while that transition was going on.
I would say for the most part, I mean, an incredible relationship. We're very open, lots of communication. That being said, there's still moments where there's breakdown, right? And a lot of it came from my side, where she has been trusting of the process and of the direction that I wanted to take things from day one, and has never really questioned that. But for me, there was times when I questioned myself, and that led to insecurity and frustration and a lot of stress in my world that she was able to help with. And sort of, she's the calming force in our relationship. I'm the crazy one that's all over the place, coming up with crazy ideas. And she's the one to just say, to steady the ship and remind me that, hey, we've been here, we've dealt with that before, we can handle this. I trust you. I believe in you. I think you're on the right path. That type of language from her again, is critical. And so I can't really speak to exactly what was going through her mind, other than she's always been rock solid. She's been supportive from day one.
Mm. There, I will say that you have done something to earn that trust. Every time we have this conversation, that there's always something there where, you've shown on previous instances that you're to be trusted, that you're going to figure it out. And so I wanted to take a minute to acknowledge you in this, because that's something that is self-manifesting. And what I also want to let the audience know is that if maybe you're struggling with this type of trust communication that David is very easily being able to talk to and say that it just works. I would say that for all the members of the audience, it starts with you. If you can stay true to your word, you start to slowly build that trust up from the beginning. And anyway, hopefully you agree with that, David. But that's my thought on that.
Yeah, I think it actually just sort of happened naturally. What you're
Mm-hmm.
articulating is just something that happened naturally in our world, and luckily I've just had a great spouse that's that is naturally inclined to go along and be low stress and be very trustworthy.
Yeah, that's perfect. Now, again, I do want to give you some credit here also for all this, as I mentioned before. Let's talk a little bit about some of the skills that you leveraged to be able to make this about face happen and get you to where you are today. In the podcast production materials, you mentioned that marketing, systems automation, and attracting capital to you are some of your superpowers. Let's talk about how you developed those. Have they always been with you, or was there something that kind of lit a flame in you to start working on these things, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think there's some, innate sort of skills that are just part of who you are and make up who you are. You're going to naturally gravitate towards certain things. As I mentioned, my dad's a mechanical engineer, um, you know, very engineer minded, probably, way further on the spectrum than I am, incredibly smart person. I'm middle ground, so I can go both ways. I can be very right brain, and I can be very left brain. But there are things that came naturally to me, and that was the idea of systematizing and just being very operational focused. Like, what's the sequential process that things need to happen in order for them to go right? And I've always been someone to map that out. I love doodling, I love drawing, I love making lists and just getting really specific and granular about what needs to happen in a process to make it run as efficiently as it possibly can. And then combine that with the marketing side. I always enjoyed marketing. I wouldn't say I'm an excellent marketer. I've just enjoyed it and I've learned from a lot of different people. And so I started to put those two together. So early on, if we go back to 2004, search engine optimization wasn't a big thing back then, but I had caught on to this concept of creating content that would attract people and then they would search for it on Google and they would potentially find me. Well, ultimately, that's how I built my short sale business, was that I started creating content very specifically around short sales and not only short sales, but my particular market. And so anytime someone searched up a term, a long tail keyword like Utah short sale specialist, my website would pop up because of the content that I created. So I don't. That's just one example of where marketing and operations came together early on. That's how I built the business. And then if you know anything about short sales, on the short sale management side of things, it's incredibly administrative heavy. And so having this marketing piece that a machine developed through content creation that would bring business into the pipeline was one piece. The second piece was actually creating the system to manage the entire short sale negotiation process, which can be, in some cases, 6 months to a year long. So combine those two things, it really gave me an opportunity to excel in that space. And I loved the short sale business because of that. And so many people shied away from it, but it was geared for me. Now, on the flip side of that, when the business shifted and I had to go back to traditional residential real estate, I hated it. And it was absolutely miserable. I'm a horrible traditional real estate agent. I'm not a great networker. I'm actually fairly introverted. And being a traditional residential real estate agent forced me to have to sort of schmooze my personal network in a way that I felt completely inauthentic to. And so I actually had to lean into my marketing and operations skill set by building a real estate team where I would hire real estate agents who would be the salespeople, and I would manage the back end marketing and operations of the team.
Let's talk a little bit more about these systems and processes that you set up. I'd like to go deeper into that because selfishly, I'm kind of in this phase right now. And I'm sure that there's some investors out there who may be thinking about wanting to approach it the same way because maybe they don't want to be extroverted and they know that extroversion is kind of this thing that people assume needs to happen in order to succeed in real estate. So let's talk about this. What systems and processes and tools did you use when you first start mapping out these processes? And, how do you approach the problem?
Yeah. Well, let me fast forward to my business today, which is heavily focused on large commercial multifamily acquisitions. I've closed 2 syndications, and my very first syndication deal without any prior capital raising experience, I raised 1.47 million on my first syndication deal. And how I did that is I think probably valuable. So the first step was using marketing to build up an investor network. Step 1. And I did that through a combination of things. My personal sphere of influence that I developed as a real estate broker, right? And number 2 was mainly through Facebook, the Facebook ads. Now, I have a unique advantage being a broker. If you're a syndicator, then you may not have the same advantage, but there's different ways that you could do this. But because I'm marketing for my real estate brokerage here locally in Utah, I'm marketing through these Facebook ads, prospective small multifamily buyers. So these are people that are looking to buy what I call small multifamily, which is under $5 million here along the Wasatch Front in Utah. It covers about 4 different counties. Okay. And the ad is very simple. It's a Facebook lead ad. So it's an ad right on Facebook, and it's a video of multifamily property. And the ad just says something as simple as, hey, are you looking to buy a duplex, fourplex, or small commercial multifamily property in Utah? And then it has some content and some copy. And then it says, to join our investor network to get a competitive advantage in this market, click here. They click on it. They fill out a form online on Facebook. And I have tools that automate this process. One being Zapier, if you're familiar with Zapier. And 2, which is a CRM that's more geared towards the residential or the real estate broker side of things, is Follow Up Boss. And so as soon as someone fills out the lead form on Facebook, that lead triggers through Zapier, and I get all their contact info inside of Follow Up Boss, and I have just a funnel set up. The first step is a sequential email campaign that welcomes them to our investor network and gives them some content and sort of positions us as an expert in the space, and also providing them with a significant amount of value up front. Once we feel like we've given enough of value and gained enough trust, then we have an ask. And that ask is, create your investor profile and tell us more about what you're looking for in your next investment property. They have to go through a long form. Okay. Lots of questions, pretty in-depth. I mean, it'd probably take them, 5 to 10 minutes to fill out effectively. And one of those questions is, are you also interested in passive investing opportunities? If they answer in the affirmative on that, then they get pushed to a different funnel. Not a different funnel, but another funnel added to it, which starts to talk about passive investing in multifamily real estate syndications. One of the next steps is to book a call with me. So the email says, hey, you said that you're interested in passive investing opportunities. Well, we'd love to chat with you about that. Here's a link, my Calendly link. So there's another tool, Calendly. They book a call on that, and that's how I fill my calendar. And I block it out. I only do investor calls on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I generally, if I want to, I can have anywhere from, 5 to 10 calls per day. So incredible. I don't know how much farther you want me to go or what direction you want me to take it, but that's the process.
This is great. This is great because I think, it's an automated system that you've built to take your customers on an experience. And a lot of people, when they're starting out, they're doing this all by themselves. They're basically just trying to have conversations one-to-one, sending emails, going back and forth from their Gmail or from their own thing. And I can tell right now that building this system takes time and effort, but would you say that it's worth the effort to do this?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because look, I didn't want to fail on my first capital raise, right? And in fact, my target with my partners for the capital raise was between 250 and 500. And I ended up, having commitments of 1.47 in 48 hours. And the reason why that happens is because I spent a lot of time. I spent a year building out that system and fostering those relationships and positioning myself to my network, to my sphere of influence, people I already knew, and also the leads that I was generating online. You have to keep in mind that the internet lead generation thing, especially when you're raising equity, it's a long play. You can't expect to be generating, leads online from people you don't know that are going to turn into investors the next week or the next month or the next few months for that matter. And so I knew from listening to other people and them saying this over and over again that I needed to start early. So a year before I knew I was even going to do my first syndication deal, I had started this process and developed this pipeline and then kept the communication going. And then when the time was right and I needed to execute and perform, I had done the work necessary to have the results that were positive.
Yeah, and I can tell that you have a lot of experience doing this, and you've probably ended up going through and tweaking this also, right? Like, this thing
Oh
is
yeah.
never always constant, right? So, can you talk a little bit about the tweaks that you need to do when you have a system like this set up?
Yeah, well, it's constant. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's never ending. So you're optimizing for different things at different times. So you can optimize for lead gen on the front end, right? On the Facebook side and the ad copy and the video and what button you're using, whether that be learn more or subscribe now or whatever button you're going to use. So you're optimizing on that side, and then you're optimizing for conversion, right? So once you get the lead in, then my whole goal is to get them to fill out my long form.
Hmm.
Well, what's the best way for them to fill out my long form? Well, one of the tweaks that I made along the way was the copy in my email. Instead of early on, the first email was a lengthy um, intro email, welcome email, and it was all like, hey, this is me, this is what I'm all about, this is what we do, we're excited to get to know you, blah 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 blah. It was long, right? With the call to action at the end being it was to fill out the investor form. We came full circle after probably a year of doing this, and the new one is welcome to Conovo Group or welcome to Conovo Capital, and please confirm your email. That's it. With a link to go confirm the email. They confirm the email, and then they immediately get pushed to the long form. And our form submission went up by 50% roughly
Wow.
from just doing that one tweet. So it's constantly testing. That's just one small example of testing things and seeing what works better and then optimizing for it.
I love that. And for people who are just starting out, or maybe people who want to raise capital from the beginning and maybe don't have the skills that you do in terms of process creation or anything like this, what advice do you have for them? Do you advise them to start learning it and playing the long game here, or what advice would you have?
Well, I think you need to know your strengths. There are some people that are incredibly good at building relationships, and they're extroverted. They enjoy, just being out with people and connecting that way. And I think if you're that person, then lean into that space. Figure
Mhm.
out, get to every single networking event that you possibly can, right? And build those relationships that way. For me, I just have to be authentic to who I am. And so I think that's the key is be authentic to who you are. If you're the extrovert, then be the extrovert and be at every single networking event you possibly can. It's the same process. You're putting leads into this funnel, right? Doesn't matter how you're getting them. You need to figure out the best path for you. But I would say for someone that maybe doesn't have that, operational leaning, you absolutely have to have some sort of CRM. I don't even think that that's optional at this point. I think you have to have it. So get the CRM, get some sort of database where you can record the details about this person so that you can stay in touch with them. So there's really three things that I think you need out of a CRM. You need a place for contact info, you need a place for notes about conversations, and you need a place to set a follow-up date. That's it. If a
Hmm.
CRM has those three things and you're just getting started, find a free CRM that has those three things and you're just fine. Because all you do is you get their contact info, you keep notes of the conversation, and you set an appropriate follow-up date. And if you do that and you do that consistently enough, you're going to build those relationships.
And that's very valuable advice for all those people who are starting, because it's exactly what I did. Now they think about it, like figuring out what my strengths were. So I can tell you that's absolutely 100% the case. Now let's take a little bit of a pivot, and I want to ask you, if you had to do this all over again, right, what do you wish that you would have known starting out?
I don't think that, so I don't think I knew I don't think I was ready to hear what I needed to hear back then. So if I were to do this over again, I would want to get started on the investing side of the business earlier. I spent over a decade on the brokerage side of the business, making good money sometimes, making poor money other times, um, without ever building any significant amount of cash flow or wealth. And so but in hindsight, there were moments in time where I was exposed to investing. I just wasn't ready to hear it. I just wasn't in the place where I hadn't had that aha moment that sort of pushed me down that path. And so I guess the answer is that I wish I would have started on the buy and hold investing earlier on, because I'd be a heck of a lot further along than I am today. That being said, my journey is my journey. And I wasn't ready to hear that piece of it. I didn't think that it was possible for me, right? For a lot of different reasons. I had a lot of mental roadblocks that I had to overcome to get to that place.
This business that we're in is very much a business of mindset, especially when you're in the entrepreneurial rush, right? Where you don't have a stable income, you don't have any of that at all, like a W-2. That's the world that I was living in for many, many years. And when you're in the entrepreneurial world, what type of things do you do to keep yourself motivated, to keep yourself moving? Because I can only imagine what that was like in 2010, right? When these regulations came out, or, the whatever happened, right? In that to short sales in that market. I can only imagine what that's like to have yourself, building many, many years for something, and then to see it get taken away from you. But obviously you took what you could from it, and you've created another successful business. And that points to the power of your mindset. So what things can you tell us about your mindset that you do to keep it optimally performing, and some things that maybe you did to help avert, some sort of crisis that you went
Yeah.
through?
Well, I'll tell you, I think probably the most important thing for me has always been early morning exercise. And, whether that's going to the gym, whether that's going for a run, whatever your thing is, maybe that's riding a bike, whatever, swimming, whatever it might be, whatever your thing is, getting that done early in the morning. For me, that was critical. And I went as far as, about 6-7 years ago, opening up a CrossFit gym with with some friends here locally.
Cool.
And I'm by no means an elite athlete. I'm just an average guy in the gym, but I knew that piece was critical to my mindset. And what's even more critical is that my wife and I both do that every morning, virtually every morning. There's some mornings where stuff gets in the way. But the alarm goes off at 5:30, and I usually snooze it at least once. And we get to the gym right around 6 o'clock, 6:05 for our morning workout together. And there's two things that happen to that. Number one, it clears my mind, and it just gets my body and my mind ready for the day. And I remember being sort of in a place of real like stress and frustration, and feeling like, man, I don't know what to do, how to do it. I don't know if I'm even going to be able to pull myself out of this hole. And those morning workouts were critical to getting all the fears and the stress that come late at night and while you're sleeping off your chest in the morning, so you can move forward in a positive way. And so I would say that's probably the most critical thing for me from a mindset perspective, is getting that early morning workout.
Great advice. I wanted to ask you too, if people wanted to be just like you, right? What is the first thing that you think that they could do in order to do that? I can see you laughing over there, but.
Well, it depends on what you mean by just like you. Like if you want to raise equity for syndication deals, or if you want to get involved in the real estate syndication business, I'm not sure if your listeners are lean more towards the active investing, where they're buying their own properties, or if they're leaning more towards the syndication space. But regardless, I think there's two critical components. Number one is find a mentor or a coach. And, I alluded to the workout thing. That's critical. But the reality is, those limiting beliefs are just those. They're limiting beliefs that creep into all of our minds. And the most powerful thing that I've found with hiring a coach or a mentor is that they help you break through those limiting beliefs faster. And here's a case in point. When I started to make this transition into the larger commercial multifamily syndication space, I was struggling. I was building up this network of investors on the brokerage side of the business, but really hadn't started to position myself as someone who was going to bring those investors into one of my deals, a bigger commercial multifamily deal where they were going to invest passively, right? And the coach that I was working with at that point in time, and I've paid for many different types of coaching and mentorship. I truly believe in it. I think it's critical. And I kept putting this off. We had a goal set for me to send out this email, sort of an intro to the space, like, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing in the coming months. I just want to give you a heads up and let you know that if you would be interested, this is the path that I'm heading down. And I lacked the confidence. I wasn't quite where I needed to be from a skill set perspective to feel comfortable sending that type of email out. And I didn't know how it was going to be received because the vast majority of my network were small multifamily people that wanted to buy stuff for their own personal portfolio, right? And my coach kept pushing me, hey, you've got to send this type of email out. And I would come back to the coaching call and not have it done.
Mm.
And it was just limiting beliefs that were weighing down on me. And he pushed me over the edge. I sent that out. And the response was extremely positive from my network. There was no need for me to have that much stress and worry and concern about how it was going to be received. It was false. And it was just a simple limiting belief that I needed to break through, and that coach and mentor helped me break through that. So that's number one. Find a mentor, find a coach. Number two, focus on the lead measure. And what I mean by that is there's a bunch of different books that talk about the same concept, but it's your lead measures versus your lag measures. Your lead measures are the activities that you have control over today, that you can have an impact on. The lag measures, which we often track, like deals closed, equity raised, whatever it might be, whatever you're trying to optimize for, we put too much emphasis on that, and we don't put enough emphasis on the lead measures. Like, what can I do today that's going to have an impact on the end result? And then stay focused on those lead measures and keep pounding away at that.
I have to ask you, David, what was the one thing that you mentioned before that finally got you to send that email
out? Well, it was the mentor. It was the mentor pushing me.
It was the constant thing where eventually you're like, okay, I give in. I've got to go ahead and just send this out. Like that.
Yeah, I mean,
that fear of facing the mentor versus like the pain, the level of pain of these two different paths ended up flipping sides, right? Is that what that was?
Well, what he helped me realize, he says, David, we could be here 2 months from now, and you would never feel comfortable sending this email out. And all you're doing is hurting yourself. He just basically helped me to see that what's the worst thing that could happen. And then when he broke that down for me and I started to rattle off what the worst thing that could happen would be, it really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And so it sounds simple. It sounds simple to just, that a mentor says or a coach says, hey, what's the worst thing that can happen? And you go and then you end up sending the email. But it built up, right?
Yeah.
And it got to a point where the pain of not achieving my goals was greater than the fear of sending out that email.
The reason that I wanted to hammer this home, David, is because first I want the listeners to understand that you, listener, may be listening to us thinking I could never reach this level, right? And that's a limiting belief. And I had a similar thing happen to me. And David, for me, what it was is I figured out that it was my ego. That was what was causing me to not hit the send button. The ego was, I wanted to have this pristine view of what my reputation was. And if I smudging it, quote unquote, smudging it just a little bit by like being any bit salesy at all, because I personally had zero tolerance for other salesmen, right? Or at least that's what I told myself. And of course, it's not true, because when you have a personal relationship with all these people in any way, it doesn't matter. And so my coach also, just like you, right, got me to the point where the pain of coming back to the table without results to a coach that you're paying, by the way, versus just giving in, swallowing your pride, or with heart pounding in your chest, pressing the click on the send button, right?
Yeah.
Like it's either one of those. So I can totally relate with that. And I just want people to have a visceral image that in many forms, you have a limiting belief as well. We all do. Yeah. And is the sooner that you can get something on your calendar with a coach, those two things, you're going to be able to get past them. And basically the world is your entire oyster at that point. And would you say too, David, that we keep going through these same patterns as we grow? You know, every time we go through a next thing, there's another limiting belief and another barrier that we have to hop through.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny that you say that, because I remember after the next coaching call, after the email was sent, I went back to the coach and we chuckled about the results, right? And he's like, "Can you believe that you were that worried about this thing?" And I remember asking him, you know, do you have limiting beliefs? Do you get worried about the next step, you know, breaking through these ceilings of achievement and what it takes to break through? And, you know, because sometimes we have in our minds that those people don't have those limiting beliefs. They don't have those same challenges. They don't have the same fears, right? And, you know, of course, the answer is yeah, absolutely. And it takes a coach and a mentor, someone who's been there oftentimes, to help us push through.
Couldn't have said it any better than that, David. Awesome. So we are getting ready to head into the final segment of our show. And I know that we could sit here and continue talking about mindset and marketing and processes for another hour or two, or maybe even for a half a day. But I think I want to be respectful of your time and continue on to the rapid round. And the rapid round is 5 questions that we ask all of our guests. Okay. And they're meant to be answered in a 30-second fashion, if possible. Are you ready?
I'll do my best.
All right. Question number 1. What book has had the biggest impact on you and why? And we do like to keep the book outside of Rich Dad or the Bible, because we get that every time.
Yeah, I can imagine. I would say The One Thing by Gary Keller.
Oh, yeah.
The concept's very simple. What's the one thing that you can do today that's going to have is going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? And it really just comes down to that concept that I was talking about earlier, focusing on the lead measure. What's the lead measure, the most important critical activity that you can do on a daily basis that's going to have the greatest impact on the end result?
So inspiring. That lead domino, as Tim Ferriss puts it,
Yeah.
right? What's the one thing that you can push down and everything else falls behind? Yep, love that. Number 2, if people wanted to emulate your success, what is the first actionable thing that they could do to follow in your footsteps today?
Some of you may be listening and have thought about getting a coach or a mentor, joining some sort of mentorship group, and you're probably not in the financial position to write that check. There's fear keeping you from taking the action to write the check, to send the wire, whatever it requires for you to get into the relationship that's needed to get you to the next level. And so I would say, write the check, join a mentorship group, hire a coach, hire a mentor, whatever it takes. There's going to be people in that world that are going to be able to get you to your goals faster than if you continue to churn, on your own.
Excellent. Number 3, what small thing do most people not know about you?
Small thing that most people don't know about me. I love to vacuum.
That's so awesome. I could so relate with that.
Dude,
You know?
there's nothing better than sitting there with an earpod in your ear, listening to a great audiobook or another great podcast, and just the hum of the vacuum and those straight lines. Like,
There you go.
Man.
It looks like manicured lawn, right?
Yeah,
Like when it's all like, laid out there
Absolutely.
nicely. It
Yeah.
all it
And then your
smells
kids
good.
come running in and screw up all the lines and you get frustrated. That's
Then
all
you're
right.
all like, all right, well, maybe next week. Love it. Number 4, how do you like to unwind and restore your creative juices individually? I think I know the answer to this one, but
For me, it's working out, and I also enjoy. I mean, if it's individually, then it's working out, even though that's with a group. But a lot of it's just internal. And then the other piece is just hanging out with my family. I've
of
got 4
course.
kids, and before we jumped on the show, I told you I was able to take my 2 boys up to the first run for skiing this season, and made it back in time for this podcast. And so those are the 2 things that I do to unwind.
Excellent. Very, very cool. And final question, what is your favorite family vacation spot?
Well, we've got a small family cabin in Duck Creek, Utah, Duck Creek Village. You referred to the village earlier in
I
the
did.
show.
I apologize
Just
for that.
just to clarify, yeah, it's just a tiny little cabin retreat area up in above in the mountains in southern Utah. And so that's where we probably spend the majority of our time together as a family, and we enjoy that.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a blast talking with you about marketing, processes, limiting beliefs, coaches, everything. We touched on all here. And so I want to thank you for your time today.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Derek.
Absolutely. But before we go, why don't you tell the people or the listeners out there how they can learn more about you and what you have going on out in the interwebs?
Yeah, probably the best way to connect with me is at conovocapital.com. That's CANOVO capital.com, conovocapital.com. Or feel free to shoot me a text or an email. My phone number is 385-233-3252. And email is david@conovocapital.com.
Excellent. Once again, David, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a blast having you on ours. I had just as much fun on this show as it was being on yours as well.
Well, I really enjoyed it, Derek. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to staying in touch with you guys.
For sure. And also for the listeners out there too, you want to look up the Apartment Investing Journey podcast because David Robinson here is the host. He does a fantastic job adding tons and tons of value, great content. I've listened to quite a few episodes myself, and he brings the goods as well. So David, thank you so much again for coming on.
Thanks, Derek.
Absolutely. And for you listeners out there who are still with us at the very end here, just want to thank you. And if you could, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, please engage with us. If you could like, subscribe, put a thumbs up, thumbs down, anything is good. We want to make sure that we're getting that interaction so we can continue to provide excellent content that's relevant to you and that is useful. And in addition to that, we also get a little bit of a boost with the algorithm gods, and we start moving up the chain and start getting more visibility to more people and being able to get more guests to help add value to you, the listeners. So that being said, that's all I have. And David, thank you again for coming on the show. And everyone, this is Derek. I'm signing off for the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.